Sometimes when I'm creating a model for something, I want to work with a set of just data. I don't really care what it is, I don't care what it looks like. I just need some numbers that I can start applying some formulas to. And an easy way to do this for me is to use a macro that I wrote a long time ago that just creates random numbers for me. So I want to look at just creating some random data in a spreadsheet using Visual Basic and to see a couple of lessons that we can learn from it. So here I have a spreadsheet and I have written a piece of code where I create some random data, one cell at a time in whatever range I want to use. I want to use the selection range. So let's have a quick look at the code in action. I'm going to select a range of data. I'm going to run my code, and there are some random numbers. So I am looping through each row in whatever I have selected, my selection. I'm going to loop through each column in my selection, and in each cell I am creating a number between 0 and 1000. A whole number because it is rounded. It's a random number. So RND is random. Multiplying it by 1000 so that my random number is between 0 and 1000. And then rounding it so it becomes a whole number. And then applying it one cell at a time into my selection. And that works. It's a quick way of creating some random numbers. But it has some drawbacks. Every time you interact with Excel, Excel wants to recalculate itself. So every time I've entered a number in one of these cells, there has been a brief calculation happen. Now, in this case, I've actually turned calculations off, so that doesn't happen. But it can still impact on your processing speed. And just as a cheat, on this particular file, I have got a massive amount of SUMIF formulas. Not massive, but I have 1,000 rows of SUMIFs across 7 columns. So 7,000 SUMIF calculations happening. And if I turn those on, and a little note here, you see I'm using my immediate window to run an individual piece of code. And that'll be covered in another course, the use of the immediate window. So I've used it to turn my calculations on. So now, if I run my code, you'll see a noticeable delay as it runs. And the more data you're working with and the more calculations in your file, the more that will slow you down. If I switch calculations back to manual, it's quicker, but still a noticeable impact. So the way around this, the best way around this, rather than just switching calculations off and on again, which is a common approach, you want to do as much processing as you can in memory within Visual Basic itself. The more processing you can do within your code, and the less in Excel, the less you have that interaction with Excel, the better. It can be harder to get your head round, but it will have a noticeable impact on your coding, on your processing speed. So I've got a second piece of code. This is the actual one that I use. And if we have a look through it, I am creating a range, which is whatever I've got selected. Range equals selection. I have created a variant here, which is an array. I've put ARR at the front of it, so I know that it's an array. data, whatever, it's a piece of data. And I've put these brackets in here when I declare it. And there's nothing inside those brackets. So I can change the size and scope of this array of data at any time. And you can think of this array like a range of data, but not on your spreadsheet, just within memory. And I've got my same I and J as I've used in my more simple piece of code. So first thing I'm doing is defining that range is selection, so that I'm still working with any piece of code that I want, any set of cells that I want. And then I'm using the size of that set of cells to redim my array. Okay, I use arrays a lot. They're really useful when working with ranges of data. Arrays can have many dimensions to them. Don't get hung up on it, use two. You want to use 2 dimensions, rows and columns, and that fits neatly with how you will use a spreadsheet. So I am redeclaring my array to be the size of my range, my selection. And I can redeclare this because when I originally declared it, I had no parameters in here. So I declared it with some brackets, which means I can redeclare it here. And now I'm going to go through the same loop that I went through before. But instead of writing data to my selection, my cell, I am writing the data to my cell of my array, my virtual array, which is held in memory in Visual Basic. I'm doing exactly the same thing, but I'm writing it to VBA. And then the last thing I'm going to do, right at the end, I am then going to write to my range, my selection, the results of my array. And I'm going to do that in one hit. So I'm not doing every cell individually, I'm doing all of them at the same time. So if I run this piece of code, instant. And if I put my calculations back on, in case they weren't before, and run it again, still instant. Compared with my 1 cell at a time, instant. So a couple of things to take away. The more we can do in Visual Basic, the better. Interactions with Excel are slow and cumbersome. We can use this nice piece of code here to create just random data very easily. In my case, I have it here, a drop down menu, data. When my computer stops pausing, wonderful Windows 10 hang up that you'll probably see many times on my videos. Create random data, and there it is, that piece of code being used there. It's been assigned to a little menu bar. And we can use that anytime we want. This menu comes from my personal macro workbook, goes with me from computer to computer. That personal macro workbook was originally created many years ago, 2001, 2002 if I recall. That piece of work means that I never have to do it again. We'll cover personal macro workbook at another time as well. For now, have a look at this piece of code, work out what it's doing, reuse it for yourself, put it in your own macro workbook, and you will never have to create random data again. Okay, thanks for watching.